Hello and welcome to Talking Reds. Now, in a breakaway from our fuller length episodes, we are delighted to bring you a short and concise summary of what's happening right now for Nottingham Forest. We look at the John Percy article and ask, do Forest really need to sell a prize asset? Is Nuno Espirito Santo's job safe? There's news on an approach from Forest to an out-of-work manager in Italy. Plus, there's all the gossip and rumours from the world of social media on who may be coming to the City ground this summer. That and more on Talking Reds Forest Roundup. Richard, how you doing, mate? Let's close that.
Wow, I felt very special there. Yeah, I'm doing good. Doing really well, thank you.
Good. Right, so as I said, we're going to keep this much shorter than our regular episode, just to jump on and have a chat about some of the Forest news that's circulating around. Let's jump straight in then, Richard. John Percy put out an article, it was yesterday, causing a bit of a stir on social media, saying that Forest now only need to raise around 20 million in what he called transfer sales to be safe and clear of PSR. And that's by June the 30th. I didn't get a chance to read the article in depth. It's behind the paywall and I'm being cheap and I haven't bought it. But reading between the lines and what a lot of other people have been talking about, someone wanted to clear up that that's not just making 20 million in sales, that's actual profit. So we need to make that profit count. He also touched on the Oral Mangala money as well. And saying that 25 million already factored in. So that to me confirms something that I had been saying recently, that the whole Oral Mangala deal, the money, that's the fee that was given as a loan fee plus the permanent transfer fee. I had said that surely had to count this side of June 30th in this period's PSR. And I know that some people were suggesting that actually the second part, the permanent transfer part, wouldn't count until July the 1st and therefore falling into another period. That to me just never seemed to make any sense. I know that the Leon financial accounts were touted as being a reason as to why that might be the case. But it never really seemed to make sense to me that Forest would allow that to happen, especially when the deal was done in January. So anyway, it looks like the whole 25 million is being factored in, but there's still another 20 million on top that is required to fall short or fall in rather, I should say, fall on the right side of PSR. What did you make of all that, Richard?
Yeah, I think in one sense it's positive in that you know what, like you just mentioned, you know what's kind of included to a degree, and kind of know what's included, at least the Mangala piece, which is good. The 20 million seems a little bit more reasonable. It seems a bit more attainable. Right. It doesn't feel as overwhelming as maybe what we were dealing with last year, clearly what we were dealing with last year. So, but as you said, there's still some ambiguity. Like you, I haven't been able to read the article in depth, but what I've gleaned from it and what I've gleaned from those who have read it is it seems like we have a better shot of doing that. I think it might be a bit premature and I know we'll probably get into this in a second, but to say, okay, does that now preclude us from actually having to sell a higher value asset, someone who can actually contribute significantly to the team versus, a list of individuals that like a Joe Worrell or Lewis O'Brien and so forth. And how much profitability can we really get? Clearly, Joe is a full profitability scenario because he was an academy player. But with like Lewis O'Brien, are we going to have to take a loss on that a little bit? So how does that help us? I mean, yeah, there's still quite a bit of gray there that we haven't explored or don't know about, but it certainly seems less overwhelming from what we have to do to quote unquote put ourselves within the on the right side of the line, like you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, again, what that's done is it's spawned lots of different other news outlets talking about Forest again when it comes to money in PSR and points deductions, and making quite a big stir about, Forest need to make a fire sale to make sure they don't get another points deduction, and TalkSport are part of that. And there's been an article in The Sun as well. And the bottom line is it's all guesswork. We don't really know. We're feeding off of snippets that come from reliable sources like John Percy. And he is usually very much an in-the-know journalist, someone that I respect and someone that I definitely look at and take a lot of what he says on board as being quite close to the truth, possibly. Yeah. But if we're thinking about keeping hold of our star asset, and we've talked about Murillo and Gibbs White and the others as being our crown jewels, and how we're almost reconciled that we're going to have to lose one of them. But if this article is to be believed, it is almost suggesting that we might be able to manage it by just getting a bit of a clear out of those fringe players. And I know this argument was presented by a lot of fans previously, and it may well be they turn out to be right, and we would want nothing more than to only have to lose the fringe players that aren't playing for the club anyway. So realistically, where are we going to make that money from? There's an article or a story that Sheffield United, as well as possibly being in for Joe Worrell, have an eye on Lewis O'Brien as well, in a joint deal that could be worth something like 10 million. Yeah. 10 million for Joe Worrell, Lewis O'Brien. The money for Joe is going to be complete profit, remember, because of his status coming through the academy. We'll be making a potential loss on O'Brien, although we have to factor in the amortization of these figures as well, and how they're staged over the period of the contract. I'm not an expert on that, and I won't try and explain it. But the bottom line is that we have to get some of these fringe players off the wage bill. Is Joe Worrell and Lewis O'Brien at 10 million good value?
Well, I think if I read correctly, I think Joe would be, right? Because as we said, I mean, you've talked about amortization, but there's still profit to be made there, right? So, but Lewis O'Brien, if I remember correctly, did he cost us 10 million?
Well, I think it was 10 million with him and Top coming in on the joint deal. So there was no real, there probably was, but I can't pull it out. There was no real kind of split defined as to who cost what on that deal.
Yeah. So, I mean, it trying to do relatively quick math, and of course, not being an actual accountant, I would imagine that's definitely going to help the cause, right? And it's not impactful in terms of depth and or what we would have hoped to retain, because they're not contributing, right? They never really played much. They didn't play at all really last year, right? Much at all. I think Joe obviously did, but not Lewis O'Brien, because he was already gone to Middlesbrough.
Right. Lewis has been out on loan for 18 months.
So it from that perspective, I think it's high value. But is that, like you said, how do we know at this stage? How do we really know if it's actually going to move the needle towards to that zero mark? And then, of course, you've got to then factor in, okay, how much money then do we need to accumulate after that, on top of that, with additional sales, to be able to actually start putting money towards bringing guys in? Because there's a long list of players, and I think Michael Temple talked about this, and I think maybe Pete Blackburn as well. Then you've got this transition from offloading to avoid PSR impact, and then subsequently trying to figure out how you're going to now increase the depth, build that squad out. And as we know, Nuno wants to keep that squad relatively thin comparatively. I mean, nothing's going to be worse than the first year in the Premier League, right, with the amount of players we brought in. But we had to do that, obviously, given the circumstances as we're transitioning. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how much we actually have available to us potentially to start to spend, and what we can do,
With the window opening up on Friday, just a couple of days away, then I think the next 2 weeks clearly are going to be all about who we can offload. There's going to be other teams as well that are in a similar position. So it's about where we can offload those players to maximize the money coming in. Other names that surely will be out of the door must include Emmanuel Dennis. What kind of figure do you think we can get for him? I mean, I'm thinking 5 million might be achievable. But has he dropped off completely, that even that's out of range, do you think? Possibly.
I mean, I think he had, 2 goals last year?
Yeah.
He didn't play a whole lot for Watford at all. So does that guy have ability? Does he have actual highlights that show he can play?
He's got ability. He's got ability. There's a player there. He's still actually younger than I thought he was, towards 30, but he's actually only 26, I think. So he's got time. Josh Bowler, another one that came in, and he was always brought in as a possibility we might get relegated. I mean, I think he's been out on loan. I think it's time now to not buy players for the Championship. We were guilty of buying players in that mad first season of 40 odd signings or whatever it was we were guilty of buying players just in case we went down. And I think that was, definitely not a good thing to do, because it really pushed up how much money we spent. And we've got to stop doing that. So Josh Bowler's got to go out for me. I don't even know what we paid for him, but 1.5 million, would you say would be about right for him? I guess, again, these folks, anyone in the comments watching, it'd be interesting to find out what you guys reckon as well. These players might be worth. Are we way off with our estimations? I reckon Josh Bowler 1.5 million, Rich.
Yeah, that seems reasonable given where he would be positioned in terms of his skill set and where he's going to end up, which again is that championship space. So that seems like a reasonable amount. Same thing with Wang Yizhou.
Yeah, I mean, another one, 1.5 million maybe.
Yeah, that seems pretty reasonable. How much of that's pure profit, I don't know, but certainly seems like it's in the right range based off of what you've seen other players going for. So
the other player that we haven't spoken about who would be pure profit would be Alex Mighton. Alex Mighton, he always had potential. He, excuse me, he would be pure profit. Mm-hmm. I think it might be time to let the lad go. And if we can get anything for him, can we get $1 million for him if he goes overseas? I know he had a spell I think it was Belgium he was in having a spell. So Alex Mighton would be another one. I think it's time to try and just get as much money as we can coming in. So just moving on, because I want to make sure that we're making this a roundup and not a full-length pod as usual, Rich. The big name sale. Let's suggest we do have to make that big name sale. Okay. Just quickly want to say afternoon to Wolfie's joining us by looks things. How you doing, buddy? Yeah, great kit. One of my favorites. And also Bruce. Hey, Brucey, over in America. Hope you're doing well, man. Who's going to be the likely one to go? Murillo for me is the obvious one. How much are we going to get from Murillo? How much should we be looking for Murillo? And let us know in the comments as well if you've got an idea on that, guys.
Yeah, I would say I think I know what the number is that we've got listed. It's probably about 60. I would say 60 plus is what we need. I think if we accept less than that, I mean, there's still value there. There's still profitability with that because of what we paid for him, which I think was 13 to 15 million to get him away from Corinthians. So there's definitely going to be some money to be made there. And that may be that. There you go. I like that number much better. That'll set us up for the next 2 years.
I think so, Bruce.
Absolutely. But yeah, I would say 60 seems the right number. And hopefully it seems like there's some Premier League teams. I think I saw Arsenal and Tottenham listed.
Good old Tottenham coming back again.
But
Forest.
That's right. Build that bidding, get that bidding war going, and then potentially you might have some other European clubs like a Real Madrid or an Atletico Madrid or someone in that vein that's potentially going to be looking at him as well. So what for me, and we've talked extensively about this, right? So if that happens, my mind, unless he's asking to leave for his aspirations to play for England, like we've mentioned, I think that keeps us with Morgan Gibbs-White.
Yeah,
and he'll wear the armband next year. I have no doubt about that. As much as I love Yates, I just think Morgan Gibbs-White, given his impact, will probably end up wearing the armband next year. So he'll be even more essential for us. And then you've got a whole list of different players. Like I know we talked about Danilo in relation to that Vital article, if I read correctly, and that our back and forth was basically that was shocking to me only in the sense that I feel like he's starting to build a little bit of momentum, and so he gets one more year with us. That's definitely valuable for us with his play on the field, and it could be even more valuable in terms of selling him. But if you get 20 million and that allows you to reinvest in your, which it seems like we're wanting to go after a number of keepers, and I think we're going to talk about that in a second. But if that reinvests back into the center back position because we've got to replace Murillo, then that's a good thing. As I think we have a little bit more depth in the midfield than we do in the back line. But anyway, yeah.
I think one thing I wanted to touch on was the Danilo thing. He was always. It's been touted. I think the Athletic were talking about this as well. He was brought in to mold and sculpture and become the player that we sell this window.
Yeah,
it didn't quite take off for him as much as they hoped. So I think it was more of a surprise that the story's coming out that he could be sold on in this window because, as you say, there still seems to be so much more we can get from Danilo. However, if we are in the situation of identifying players in the South American Brazilian market, bringing them in, and then turning them around for profit, because ultimately, when we first came into the Premier League, we were buy. We've now got tangible assets. We now have something to trade with. We would prefer to hold on to Danilo for much longer, but because we overspent, it's forced us to do things a bit quicker than we wanted to, so that we don't breach again. So selling Danilo this time round, I feel, would only be because we are so close to making the PSR work for us, and his sale could be the one that solves it. It would be less than what we perhaps would get from in a year's time, but sometimes you have to suck it up. We didn't suck it up with Brendan Johnson. We got caught short. If Danilo goes, I think 20 million is the kind of figure that we might look for him. I think, if I remember right, we paid 6. Again, I'm not too sure about the amortization of all of this, but this is all quite crude. Wolfie has just sent me over something. Yeah. Thanks very much, mate. Just looking at amortization value. So obviously, Joe Wall didn't cost anything. His transfer value, Forest Fan TV, picked up at around the 4 million mark. We said 5. Yates might be 10. I think Yates is going nowhere, though, personally. The transfer value of the likes of Taiwo Awoniyi could be 25 million. They're saying maybe the injury record is going to bring him down a touch. Callum Hudson-Odoi could be worth 30. Gibbs White could be worth, from their figures, about 60. And again, Murillo, 60. We'd make the most money on Murillo. We paid a smaller amount for him. So that might be where we make the most money. So it could still be Murillo. But if it's the fringe players we talked about, plus one lower level gem, such as Danilo, to make it work, maybe the guys that have the figures will know more than obviously we do. And so therefore they will know and do the sums accordingly. But look, it's a minefield. We're not too sure where it's going to go. We'll find out more when the window opens. We're going to lose someone, I think. Sangare, interest apparently from Galatasaray. Again, we've had other sources saying that these kind of things are spoken about regularly, and there's never anything in it. Niakate was rumoured to be going, but apparently Nuno's put his foot down and wants him to stay. So we'll see. Awoniyi out the door, we're not sure. We'll have to see what happens as we go with as the transfer window opens on Friday. Before we look at possible incomings, there's a story in the news about Forest making an approach for out of work former Lazio, former Inter Milan, and the recently departed AC Milan manager, Stefano Pioli. He spent the last 5 years at AC Milan. So he apparently turned Forest down. From all accounts, it seemed like Nuno was fixed to stay. What does that say about Forest's view on Nuno's job? If they're making an approach for Pioli, is Nuno's future still in doubt, Richard?
Well, and you package that with the earlier news, right? Shortly after the season completed, when they were looking at Italiano from Fiorentina, who has obviously had a good season. They played Olympiacos, right, in that final. So, it's a little odd. I don't know what that really means. Maybe it has more to do with the fact that maybe he's getting interest from other clubs, and so he's mulling that, versus they want him out the door. They see an opportunity to find someone they consider to be an upgrade. I don't know if they see it that way. And clearly, this gentleman left AC, just got let go or from AC Milan. So how much is it really an upgrade in that sense? But I don't think he's going to go anywhere. I think it's just a lot of smoke and mirrors at the given moment. It's all that stuff that leads up to the transfer window. And my sense is he's probably going to want to look at what we're going to do. And that may help be somewhat of a tipping point, and by virtue of the fact that he may have more insight into and more influence on how the team's constructed. I'm sure that makes a difference, but my inclination is he's not going to go anywhere. I think he gets at least up till the January transfer window as our manager, and then if something's not progressing as intended at that point, then something drastic might change, similar to what happened with Cooper last year.
Yeah, I think I agree. I can't see them making a change now unless
Right.
someone comes in for Nuno and he himself decides to go. I think stability and knowing what's going on is really important. My thoughts on Nuno have been well documented on here and other places as well. But I'm 100 million gazillion % behind Nuno if he is
Yeah.
our manager. Let's make no mistake about that. I'd love him to have a great preseason. I'd love him to prove us all wrong if we've ever doubted him and turn Sangare into the beast that we know he can be. And he's going to want to build his own team. And that means he's going to want to have players coming in. And so rumoured incomings include the 6'8" giant goalkeeper from Corinthians, Carlos Miguel. We talked about him on our episode with Alan recently. So we know a little bit about Carlos Miguel. And we know that it is possibly edging towards a done deal. I've never seen him play. I've seen a few clips that were put out on Twitter and so on. He's got the wingspan of a griffin.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Wolfie put one out last night. I think that may have been a match that just happened, and he had an absolutely incredible save. I mean, that was phenomenal considering his height. That can't be easy considering how low that ball was. So there's clearly talent. There's talent. I
answer the question about can he get down low, because that was one of the big gripes that everyone had with Pantilimon. It took him about 5 years to get down, and so Carlos Miguel, proved that he can do that with that shot you mentioned. Then another goalkeeper, another Brazilian under-23 international, playing with Gil Vicente in Portugal. He goes by the name of Andrew. Very Brazilian. These Brazilian names are brilliant. We have Fred, we had Andrew, we have all kinds of Hulk. 6'2" goalkeeper. I know nothing about him at all, but it's another name that's been mentioned, as well as Vital, the centre back. Now, this one seems like it's got a little bit more life in it. Interest from West Ham as well, Richard.
Shocker. Everybody that we're going after is interested, but West Ham.
We're in the same market as of the likes of West Ham. So we are, I think, going to have to bring in a centre back. Felipe's retired. Let's say Murillo goes. That's going to give us Bolly. It's going to give us Omabama Daly. It's going to give us Niakate. I think we're too. I still think that would mean we're too short, because I think we are going to see more three at the back, three centre backs this season. I'm not saying that's how we'll play every game, but I think that we will see more of that for certain fixtures, especially up against top six sides. So I think we need to bring in two more centre backs. There was one other that was mentioned that we were talking about before we came on that came out this morning. Montassar Talbi. He's a 6'3" centre back from Lorient in League 2 in France. He's a Tunisia international, age 26. Again, don't know much about this guy at all, but that's the market we're dipping into, the European market, it seems, again. So we would just need to see how that story develops. More that we do know, or players we know more about. I know it's been around now for a week or so, but Che Adams, will he go to Wolves? Will he come to Forest? I, for one, would be very much in favour of Che Adams. I know that it's not everyone's cup of tea for some reason, but as a player that can score goals, has scored goals in the Premier League, he can come in as a backup to Taiwo and Chris Woods. He may end up not being a backup. He may end up coming on and scoring a load of goals. Chris Woods was the backup to Taiwo, and now people aren't sure whether a fully fit Taiwo versus a fully fit Chris Wood, who do you play? Because Chris Wood scored 14 Premier League goals last season in about 20-odd appearances. So, as much as these well-laid plans seem to be the case, players can come in and they can make a difference. Yes, I know that Wolfie at Forest Fan TV, not a big fan of Che Adams, but I say, hey, if he comes into the club, you've got to get fully behind him. He's done nothing wrong. He's 26, 27. He's scored goals at Championship level we know about. He scored goals in the Premier League for Southampton. He could be a good backup to what we've got as well. Thoughts on Che Adams, Richard?
Yeah, I think we don't envision him being the starter. I think if you look at it right now, if the season were to start tomorrow, the depth chart would basically look like you've got Wood starting right, then Iwanyi, and then Che Adams likely is in that third position, but it certainly puts us in a more advantageous situation than we were last year, because we were at a point where we really, I think I'd mentioned this before when we were talking with Alan, you've got Wood and then you have Origi. So I don't think it's going to be worse than that. I mean, Woods was fantastic, but with Che Adams, I feel like we have a little bit more stability. Hopefully Awani can find form and be great all season long and really put the pressure on whether you start him or whether you start Wood, and that's a good problem to have. But if he gets offloaded, right, for a really good price, then once again, what are you going to do? So I think they're being pretty shrewd about what they're doing to both in terms of stabilize, give depth, and as well as be prepared in the event that Awani does get sold or can't play.
I have to be honest with you. I would not be at all surprised if a decent bid came in for Taiwo Awoniyi. I would not be at all surprised if Forest take it. I'm not saying that's what I want to happen. I'm not saying that I think Awoniyi is a bad player, because I don't. I think when he's fully fit and he's full systems blasting out, he's fantastic. I'm not suggesting he's not. But you've got to weigh up the whole picture. 2 seasons with us, now injured for large portions of both seasons. You might think if an offer comes in, this might be the best it's going to get. Because if he has another injury this season, that's going to really dent confidence in the market in that player more than it might be at the moment. So, excuse me, I beg your pardon. If something decent came in, I could see Forest accepting it. And the player that's been touted as coming in, if they do lose Taiwo Awoniyi, is Ben Diaz, which again I know has split a lot of people's opinions. What do you think on Ben Diaz? And should you go back to an ex-girlfriend or not?
Yeah, I love that analogy. I would highly, I think that, it was Carl said that, right? I don't think it's the most illustrious, clearly option, but if you look at how he played against us again, that was towards the end of the season. Things were somewhat, concluding. He was absolutely cutting through us through the entire match. And so I think there's ability there, how consistent he can be. I mean, we offloaded him as a young player years ago, right? He ended up over in Spain with Villarreal, I believe. And so he's kind of become somewhat of a journeyman a little bit. So can he score goals? I think he can. Is it as consistent and as effective as Che Adams? Probably not. But it definitely, again, adds some depth. It's not a bad piece to have in the event that you for whatever reason can't secure Che Adams. I know we're going to possibly talk about Tommy Conway. He seems a little bit more intriguing to me because he's younger and he seems like he's an ascending player. And why not go for those? That seems to be the profile to a degree. They're either right in their prime or just or young or just in that 20 to 26, 27 range, which seems to be at a reasonable price. So the question is okay, we're looking exclusively for depth potentially, but we may also be looking for possible players that come in and, find form and assimilate to the Premier League and then become really, really effective for us. And now we've done a great bit of business, just like we did with Callum Hudson-Odoi last year, right? I mean, he's kind of in an injury-prone sort of narrative, and then he came in and played phenomenal, and now you potentially valuing him at $35 million. So I think they're looking at the right player that's kind of in that same sort of ilk. But Conway would be really intriguing to me, almost more than Che Adams, just because of his potential and his youth.
Yeah, I mean, he's 21. He was the young player of the season for Bristol last season.
Right.
He scored 12 goals. He was called up to the wider Scotland squad for this Euros by Steve Clarke. Again, he's a young player who might be brought in to be that backup striker, but again, very much unproven. I want Forest to be doing more with their signings, if I'm honest with you. There's always room for bringing a young player in, but we saw with Ribeiro, who came in, and we were looking to possibly make his loan move something permanent. He showed promise. He's only 18, but they decided not to buy him. It may have been the price tag that put them off him.
Right.
But I've spoken about this previously. My preferred option would be Adebayo from Luton. He might come with a higher price tag than what Forest want to pay, because Luton will definitely want to maximize the money they can get for him. But the striker position is definitely a place that we need to strengthen in. That much is clear. And whether it's Che Adams, whether it's Ben Diaz, or another, we definitely need to make sure we've got secure backup for Chris Wood and Tyrone Awoniyi. So lots of names being mentioned. We probably missed one or two out, and it's an ever-changing thing at the moment. And that just about sums up our main headlines for now. We wanted to come and give you our first roundup report that we've done since we started Talking Reds, just to have a little bit more content going out whilst things are happening. So, as I've said previously, we're not in the know. We are picking up a lot of the news from social media like you guys are, and just putting it into a quick roundup program to discuss it, chew the fat, and see where some of these rumors might go. Keep an eye out on our Twitter and other social media channels as well. And we'll be back again, hopefully next week, with your latest Talking Reds Forest Roundup.